Well, hey, welcome everybody, and I am here with a good friend, special guest as always, Ashley Cotter Cairns, head of comic book strategy in Goldin. I'm just impressed with this really fancy lower third. Sorry, but we are coming to you with a few big things happening. First, we probably should touch on there's two huge auctions at Goldin coming up. Give us a little intro. Tell us a little about. Well, let's go into the Goldin 100, which is really special. So I'll let you take it away.
So the first thing I heard about the Goldin 100 was, I think about 8 to 10 weeks ago, Ken Goldin, who was the founder of Goldin, came into the sales meeting and he said, we're going to do the biggest auction in Goldin's history. And there are going to be only 100 spaces for people to sell their premium items. It's going to be the best of the best.
Oh, wow.
And immediately I got excited about this, because when Ken says the best of the best, he really means it. And so we're all sitting there in sort of like stunned silence. And so someone said, well, what exactly do you have in mind? And he said, I want, he rattled off a bunch of sports stuff. I'm sorry, I'm never going to claim to know anything about sports collectibles. I've learned that Honus Wagner is a thing, but apart from that, I get mixed up between pop star names and sports star names. So I come from Europe, so I don't know the culture of North American sport very much. But immediately we started talking about comics. He said, I want an Action 1 in there. I want a Detective 27 in there. And I know where there's a high grade copy of Superman 1. And we actually had a couple of contacts for Action 1. So Sean and I were discussing it, like, who should we call? Like, which one of the ones we know about do you think is most likely to get into the Goldin 100? And when we pitched it to Ken, he said, well, I know those guys and they're going to want a reserve. And he said, I'd rather sell a lower grade copy without reserve because I want it to sell. Because when you only have 100 slots, this thing's going to be massively publicized. We're doing VIP parties. We're doing crazy publicity on this. So it's going to be expensive to market this. And there's only 100 spaces. So each one counts. So then Ken brought the Action 130 that you just shown on the screen. And so that's being sold without reserve. And the chance to own an Action 1, I mean, we talked about this before. It's just very unlikely that you'll see an Action 1 come up for sale more than a couple of times a year. Really, really rare. If that, sometimes once a year, sometimes not at all. Pricing that book is really, really hard because of that. But I guess it's worth about 2 to 3 million. I don't know. It's crazy. It's crazy because every time an Action 1 comes onto the market, everyone goes, well, and they sort of stick their finger in the air and try and figure out what it's worth. But every time a new record gets set for that grade, because people with the money and the inclination to own one know that they may never have another opportunity. And Goldin was responsible for selling the 6.0 rocket copy privately for 3.4 million. So that was a 6.0, and this is only a 3.0. But if you don't have the funds to go over $3 million for a 6.0, you're competing for a very, very small number of books. That the pool is very shallow, and so people who want an Action 1 have to jump on it when it comes up. So that's why a new record is set every time they sell, because the people who missed out last time say, I'm not missing out this time. And so that's a really exciting opportunity. Then there's a Detective 27, which for me, I'm not going to diss Superman, of course, but for me, Detective 27 is the book of the hobby. Like, first appearance of Batman is always for me going to be the book of all time. Like, it's my favorite book. I always dreamed of owning one. In fact, if I could, I would own this one, because it's exactly the kind of grade that I thought I could afford when I was making my plans. I think at the time when I said to myself, I want to own a mid-grade Detective 27, it would have been about $800,000, which I didn't have, but it seemed like an attainable sum of money if I sold
Yeah.
everything I owned and didn't spend any money, and you know, just like if all the money I ever earned ever was all invested and it ended up at that kind of money, then I could buy a Detective 27 in mid-grade. And now our estimate on that, I think, is 2 million plus. I don't know. It's a hard book to price, but I think at least 2 million, and who knows what else, you know. Yeah, the sky's the limit, really, because again, they do not come up very often. And again, if you're fighting to own the first appearance of Batman, don't miss it, because the next one may be a long time coming.
I'm just mesmerized by it. First, it's a beautiful copy, 6.5, and it just looks. And then even the Action 1, I think, 3.0. But like we've talked in the past about discerning collectors, right? That's a beautiful 3.0. Like the cover is, you know, fully intact. It's, you know, again, if you're putting this up display and whatnot, like that, yeah, if you have the money, it's a gorgeous copy. They both are, and they're both, I think, to your point, like one and 1A, in my opinion, of the absolute ultimate grails of comic collecting. Like Action's the one that basically started it all as far as superheroes, and then Batman, obviously Batman, and it's never gonna lose popularity. It is. I'm not often at a loss for words. This time, it's just ridiculous. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, it gets more interesting from there, because we also have a high grade Superman 1, which we were just talking about a few minutes ago before we started this, and the fact is that there are less copies of Superman 1 in the world. I mean, and now when I don't really count restored examples of books when I count the census.
Okay.
Because yes, if you can't afford or don't want to pay for an unrestored example, if you're lucky enough to see one, a restored example, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with buying restored books, but there's definitely a stigma attached to them by a certain amount of people in the hobby. So they're never ever going to bridge the gap between universal books and restored books. Never. They're always going to be considered inferior. And there's still degrees of inferior when it comes to restoration. You know, here we are talking about restored books, and we're not even talking about this book, but there are lots and lots of restored Superman 1s, but there are not that many unrestored Superman 1s. Is the point of that. So this one is in the top of the census. There's an 8.0 out there. I think that's the highest grade, 8.0.
That broke a record. I think it was a year or two ago, right? Or maybe last year.
It was last year. Yeah. It sold for a reported 5.4 million. Now, what blows my mind about that is that the last time an Action 190 came up for sale, it went for 3.2 million on eBay, I believe. And I mean, obviously, if that comes back to market, it will break a record, but I don't know if it's ever going to come back to market. There are two 9.0s. They're both owned by a Middle East collector. So
what does that work? I mean, it's so hard to estimate, but we love to speculate. Is it like 20 million or something? I mean, that's gotta be like up there. Like, and it's just,
I don't know yet that the hobby is ready to go as high as 20 million on a comic book. I don't think so. I'm not saying it never will, but I think that, well, look, if the top graded copy of Superman 1 is worth 5.4 million, then the top graded copy of Action 1 should be worth more, because it's the actual first appearance of Superman.
Yeah.
So you could at least argue it's worth 10 or maybe 15. I don't know. Like, impossible to say. The same owner has both 9.0s.
Wait, what?
Yeah, no, there's a collection called the Impossible Collection.
Oh my God.
And it's a Middle East collector, and he owns both 9.0 copies of Action 1. So if you're competing for an Action 1, the top of the market is gone. Like, unless someone discovers a much nicer one somewhere else, I don't know. It's very unlikely. But at least both the 9.0s are locked up. I don't know how long they're going to be locked up for, or whether the guy will ever sell, but as far as we are aware, he's not going to.
Yeah.
So returning to this book, if an 8.0 is worth 5.4, then this book's worth 3 to 4 million, maybe. It's very hard to say. Again, if you want a high grade Superman 1, they just don't exist. They literally almost don't exist. So this is your chance to own the best one available, and probably will ever be available, until someone does find a nicer copy. I mean, never say never, right? There was a Batman 1 that got graded 9.4.
That's insane.
And
That's insane.
It was insane. I remember Sean sending me a link to it, because I've always wanted a Batman 1, and that's another book. They said, oh, I could probably afford to own one of those, and then I can't anymore. But yeah, so that book came to the market a couple of years ago, maybe, at least a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. I remember because he sent me a link, and he said it's a 9.4.
How is that possible, though?
I know it's very unlikely. There are lots of reasons why it's unlikely. Never mind, the randomness of time and everything else, and fire and flood and theft and all that. The fact that it has a yellow cover, very similar to Superman 1, actually. Yellow cover books are really hard to get in high grade, and it's Detective Comics 140 has that yellow cover. That's the first print of the Riddler, and it's just like any copy that's not near mint, which is there are like 2, shows dirt. Like, just from holding it, you probably put dirt on it. And the yellow is such a it's you think black books are tough, yellow books are even tougher, I think. They do not hold up well over time. And so to see I don't know, we're talking about another book, but to see the 9.4 of Batman 1 was just amazing, and that sold for 2.25 million. I'm certain when that comes back to market, it'll
steal.
Yeah.
It's hard to say that with a 2.2 million, but a 9.4 is, I know. It's just, and that's the thing you talked about, Honus Wagner. Like, the story behind that is, and I knew this as a kid growing because I was into sports and into sports cards, but he basically, the story goes, and who knows if this is true or not, because it's 100 years ago at this point, is baseball cards when they first came out were in tobacco packs, not, we get bubble gum, and now they're not. There's nothing in there. People always show up those amazing rookie cards that have the bubble gum, stick them on the back, and I'm sure that kills the grade. But Honus Wagner was not a fan of like promoting. My wife's printing something right now. Promoting tobacco and tobacco use to kids, and so he went back to them and said, shut it down. And they'd made like 4 or 5 copies, or a handful of copies, and so that's why that's worth so much. I mean, the guy's a Hall of Famer, but it's just the rarity, right? And I think, to your point, it reminded me of that story, which is really funny. So it's someone found one, and I think Wayne Gretzky owns it now. Found one in their backyard, buried in like a tin box, in like almost pristine condition. And so when you were saying unless someone unearths one, the first thing I thought of was Honus Wagner. When I remember as a kid seeing that, it was like in the newspapers, whether it was like USA Today or whatever, and they were like, someone dug in their backyard. I don't know if they had a metal. I don't know how. I got to look it up, and this is so long ago, but I can't. That's my life dream, is somehow you like are looking in your backyard, and then there's like a Batman 1 there that's like almost perfect condition. Like, that's the greatest thing in the world.
Forget about it. Yeah. There was another story of a guy who found an Action 1 in the wall of his home when he was renovating it, and he got into a fight with his mother-in-law, who claimed that she should have some of the money from it, and he threw it across the room, and the cover got torn. And yeah, I think it was something like, it would probably have been about a 3, and then by the time it got a grade, it was a 1.5 or a 1.8 or something, because of the cover being torn. I mean, it just goes to show that gratitude is not universal. You find a literally a gold mine, like you find it a windfall, something comes into your hands that you probably shouldn't get, and it's just random chance, and yet there are some people who just don't realize, like, this doesn't happen to everybody. It just doesn't. So be nice, be kind to each other, let some stuff go. Okay, it's hard because you don't know what people's circumstances are, and whatever, and mental health is a challenge for some people too. But it's just strange when you hear stories of that moment that should create this sort of spark of joy, and
Yeah.
it ends up being something totally different. Anyway, returning to this topic, this is a spark.
Yeah, we can go off all day long.
Seeing this book is a spark of joy.
Oh,
We'll talk about another one that's coming up for sale at Goldin shortly, but actually, Sean and I own that book.
yeah, I
And
think you remember telling me that.
we were so excited to own any copy of Superman 1 in a Universal holder. But when you look at it alongside this one, you're like, these aren't almost like the same species. They're just like, it's so strange to see a Superman 1 this nice. And whoever owns it, wow, I will personally write to them and tell them they are really lucky and they should enjoy it every day, because it's amazing. It's an amazing copy of Superman 1, and there aren't many of them. And this is one of the absolute best.
Looks amazing. Just the stories that this could tell. I mean, yeah. It gives me chills. It's pretty insane. The other one that I picked out also that I saw in the 100, because there was a handful of books there, was also, I think, the Peep 22, which I think is super cool and super unique. Another one that's in a great grade. And the first appearance of Archie. It's not even on the cover, but I mean, that's incredibly cool as well. And something that you don't see every day. And so that's kind of rounds up, the core 4 that I saw in the 100, when there's way more. But the ones that just are like, wait, what? Like, this is insane.
So you talk about rare books. Pep 22 is, as you said, first appearance of Archie. I think the first cover appearance of Archie is Jackpot Comics #4, and he's in a little circle at the bottom of the cover, and that's his first cover appearance. But Pep 22, I think there are less than 20 Universal copies. And this 6.5 is one of the top of the census. I think it's somewhere in the, without looking it up, I think there might be 4 nicer than this. Probably one of those would be Mile High. I don't know if anyone's heard of Mile High on this stream, but that's a topic for another day. I could talk about Mile High.
Yeah. To summarize it real quick, it's a collector and a shop that basically used to and still does have some of the highest graded. It's
way more interesting than that. It's way more interesting than that. So the owners of the former owner of the Mile High collection were the children of Edgar Church, who was this kind of graphic artist, and he was, I wouldn't call him a recluse, but he had some very strange traits. Let's just say that. And Chuck Rosansky, who owns Mile High Comics, discovered this collection purely by luck. Wow. Because the person who Edgar Church got sick and they had to put him in a home. And so they wanted to sell the family home, and the comics were in the way. And when we say in the way, we're looking at, there's about 30,000 Golden Age comics stacked up in the basement, like 3 feet deep across the whole basement, and then into a closet. And the closet was floor to ceiling. And when they called Chuck, he was the second person they called. That's why I say it was luck. And there's lots of things, unkind things said about Chuck and around the Mile High collection, but people don't realize how different comic book collecting and dealing was back in the day. This is 1976, I think. And so these books weren't, as they are now, 80 something years old. At the time, they were 20, 25 years old.
Yeah.
So they called him because the first dealer they called said, "We don't do house calls." So it's like the guy that said, I'm not signing the Beatles. You guys have got no future. Like that's the same. Like whoever it is or was probably must have kicked himself backwards and forwards across his house for weeks and years, because Chuck Rosansky said, "Oh, sure, I'll come and have a look." And he went in and he said, he asked for a glass of water because his mouth went so dry that he couldn't speak. And then he was trying to drink the water, but he kept spilling it down his front because his hand was shaking so much. And so he was looking at all these Golden Age comics stacked across the floor of the basement. And he said, "Wow, there's a lot here." And he said, "No, that's not everything." And they opened this door, and then there's this closet, floor to ceiling, and all the older stuff was in there. And so they didn't let him touch it. So he's kind of just like going through it, and he could see all the early #1s and everything were all stacked up face down from like the lowest number to the highest number. So they were stacked like it was perfect storm. It was in a dry basement, in a perfect climate, which is Colorado. Kept out of the light, so there was no dust shadows or sun shadows. And then in the closet, the ones in the closet were in better shape than the ones obviously on the floor. Anyway, all that to say, he couldn't fit them all in his van, so he negotiated a price for them, and he said, you should let me sell these on consignment. You'll do way better. And they said, no, we just want them out of here. So he couldn't fit them all in his van. So they made him come back the following week. Because I said, it's not convenient for you to come back tomorrow. No, we'll see you next Saturday. So he got half the collection out of the house on day one, but not the stuff in the really good stuff that was in the cupboard. And he didn't sleep for the whole week because he was thinking, what if they sell it? What if they dump it somewhere? Because he'd seen they dumped all their father's artwork in a skip outside the house, because there was a lot of animosity between the kids and the dad, because of the way he was when they were growing up. He wouldn't let them anywhere near the comics. Like, imagine you're a kid. Oh, I want to read those. No, you're not. Touch them. It was one of those situations. Quite often, the Pedigree collections, the ones with the really high grade stuff, were owned by strange people, because it's a strange thing to do when you think about it.
Yeah.
There's another very famous Pedigree called the Twin Cities Pedigree.
Okay.
That's a Silver Age Pedigree. And I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. So the guy was a bus driver, and he'd spend his wages on comics, and he would go through them on the rack looking for the best ones, take them home, and then store them in a room. And no one knew about this until he died. They called the superintendent called the fire department because there was smoke coming out of his apartment. He suffocated on the smoke and died. And there was like a fire in the kitchen or something. But the comics weren't touched. They were in a separate room. And no one knew about it. So when they opened the door, there's this perfect collection of Silver Age comics. And again, it's those kind of people that are just so strange. They just like put them away, and they never touch them. And they're really particular about choosing the exactly best copy. Anyway, so Edgar Church, now high copies of everything. Like, some of them are missing. The strange thing is that it was one of the greatest collections ever discovered. And he didn't know what to do with them. You didn't have eBay. You didn't have an easy way to sell 30,000 high grade Golden Age comics. They weren't even better than average. Like, some collections you get them and you go, oh, this is nice. This Silver Age collection, they're all at 7 or 8s. That's really unusual. No, these were like 9.2, 9.4, 9.6, 9.8 shape. And the average Golden Age book at a convention was like a VG. So he'd go to conventions with his stock, and the dealers would just swarm around him, and they'd spend all the money they had on his stuff. And then the rest of the convention would be really weird, because everyone would be sitting around going, I don't even know why we're here. No one's going to want our stuff. They only want that. It just changed the game. The hobby was there were 3 grades in the Overstreet price guide. And he said, we need more grades because these books changed the game so much. They just broke the grading structure that they had at the time. So he had to sell a significant portion of the collection just to pay for ads in Marvel comic books, because he thought, well, if I advertise these for sale in Marvel comic books, I'll sell them mail order. And I think the number they wanted was $21,000, which in 1976 was an enormous sum of money. So he sold a lot of the big keys to a dealer or a collector who had that money. And there are tons of stories. I mean, we could fill a whole podcast with this. There are tons of stories about that pedigree. But no, he doesn't own any of them anymore. Chuck Rosansky, I'll finish this story by saying that Chuck Rosansky subsequently had to take his bookkeeper to court because she'd been embezzling money from the company. Comics. She was also the accountant, so she was accountant and bookkeeper. So anytime you have an accountant who's also your bookkeeper, you have to be careful, because they get to like tally things up and make.
There's no checks and balances. It's church and separation of church and state. Edgar
Church and state. So it turns out that she'd been sort of siphoning money out of the company for years, and he was almost bankrupt, and all he had left were the mile high copies of Action 1 to 10, which he intended to keep forever. And he turned down an offer in 1986 or something of $1 million for the Action 1. And he had to sell them in a hurry to keep the business afloat. And I think he got, 80,000 or something for the whole thing. Like, and yeah, so sorry, I got that bit of the story wrong. The next owner would turn down an offer of 1 million for the Action One.
Wow. Okay. That makes
So
more sense.
yes, so he no longer owns them. In fact, I remember there being a little bit of a press release when he sold the very last book, which was Red Rider Comics #1, I think. And that was the last of the Edgar Church books he still owned.
Wow.
Yeah, I got really obsessed about Pedigree collections. There are some amazing stories, but let's do a podcast just about Pedigree collections.
Seriously, that's fascinating.
It's so much fun.
I mean, you lit up when you said it. Like, it's a lot better story than you think, and I was like, I'm in. I mean, I literally am like hypnotized right now with that story, and it's also like really sad too, because I mean, like you said, to come up like, it's almost like the lottery winners, you know, that have that bad like curse and the bad luck when they win the lottery and they're so excited, and then like just all these bad things happen to them, to come upon this treasure trove and to have, like, you know, I just can't even imagine it. I would be so excited, over the moon, but I'd also want to do it with people that also enjoy it, right? Like, you know, what's the fun in it if you can't like enjoy the fact that you just came on this windfall, and then to have, you know, the bookkeeper kind of like, you know, do what she did, and then
it's
sad.
If you read, like, he wrote a blog for years, and I read every single blog post, and that's how I know so much about this. If you read, he's the one. He talks about it very differently to the people who observed all this happening and who talk about him. When he talks about it, he's full of gratitude. I think he's a very grateful person in general. He's quite inspirational to me. I find his attitude to life very good. And he said, I built Mile High Comics into what it is because of the Mile High collection, and you know, without that, I wouldn't have the company I have, and I'm very grateful for what it's turned into. And he has a thriving business. He still does. I hope he's okay. I heard recently he wasn't well, so I hope he's better. But no, nice guy. Like, I think he's a genuinely nice guy, and he never said, "Oh, it was cursed" or anything like that. There's other people that said, "Oh, the curse of Mile High," and he's like, "No, this is ridiculous." Like,
Wow.
I'm so grateful for what I had, and it changed the hobby. It really did change the hobby.
Wow.
And yeah, he's always going to be remembered for that. So Pep 22. The reason I mentioned that was because I was curious if there was a Pep 22 in the Mile High collection. I don't know if there was, and if there was, I don't know if it's been certified yet, because the highest graded is an 8.5.
Wow.
Second highest is a 7, and then this is the third highest graded, and that's of a total 19 unrestored copies. So it's not an exaggeration. I know sometimes there's a lot of hyperbole around, oh, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to own. Blah, 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 blah. Honestly, if you have the funds to buy this, and this is not in the same league by any means as the Action One or the Detective 27 or the 7.0 Superman One. We don't even know what this is worth. It's that rare. We told the consignor that it's probably worth 400,000 to 500,000, but it's a tricky book because Archie Andrews, being like who he is,
Archie,
Archie Andrews. I'm not downplaying the importance of the character, and he was very, he had legs. Like, that character was still being published. I think actually I still see Archie Comics at the checkout when I buy groceries with my kids. I look at them and I'm like, is that an Archie Comics? They still exist. They've published all kinds of things too. Like they published Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Scooby Doo. Like, Archie's been around since what is this, 1939, 1940, 1941?
41 is this one, yeah.
41, yeah. So Archie's been around since 1941. That character has really endured.
Yeah.
And there was something probably not relevant now in the way that it was relevant back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, maybe arguably the 60s, when teenagers had less competition for their attention. Now we have hundreds or thousands of streaming channels. We have video games. We have all kinds of entertainment. You can stream music and podcasts and whatever. Then if you had a television when they were invented, you had 1 or 2 or maybe 3 channels max, and then you had books, you had comics, you had music. Like, if you could afford a record player, like, there really wasn't that much competing for your attention. So things like I Love Lucy was dominated the
Oh yeah.
airway, because what else are you going to watch at the time? There really isn't
Oh yeah.
much else, and it was very good. Archie comics were really good. They were really good at capturing the spirit of what it was like to be a teenager in that era, where you worked for minimum wage at some like soda fountain or something. I don't even know how to describe it. Shoving fries and burgers to your friends because you don't have any cash to go out with, so you had to earn it like working at the local soda fountain or whatever, and then having to scrape together a few nickels and dimes to take your girl out for to see a movie or whatever. It was the perfect epitome of all that for younger people.
Yeah.
And it was written in a way that was not directly offensive, though there are a few examples of very edgy Archie covers, but mostly they were not directly offensive. So if your younger siblings saw them, it wasn't going to be a shocking thing. The parents wouldn't ban Archie in the house, but a teenager would see the subtext. And so almost in a way that Pixar movies are funny for kids.
Yeah.
Adults also laugh at the adult humor. Archie was like that. So I'm sure some adults actually enjoyed Archie too. It was one of those little guilty pleasures that people probably would admit to. Anyway, all that to say that Pep 22 is literally probably I don't know. I need to look at all the census numbers, but certainly the rarest book that's in the Goldin 100. It is the rarest of the books that we've offered this year, and probably will do all year. And it's not so unaffordable. I mean, I'm not a big enough Archie fan, to be honest, to sell everything I own to buy a Pep 22, where I would do for a Detective 27. But still, like, if this is your thing, and even if you set aside the first appearance of Archie and just look at this is an amazingly cool cover.
Yeah.
It's published in wartime. This is such an amazing patriotic cover. It's so typical of the covers of this era. In the imagery is really it's really gutsy. It's sort of like the scary times that people were living. I don't think we can really appreciate how frightening it was in World War II. I know America was sheltered from it to some extent for the first half of the war, but even so, the world was in a very bad way. And any kind of I always liked seeing those comic books that had like buy war bonds on the cover. It's like the comic book publishers took to inspire that patriotism, and like, we can do this. And this cover is like that. It's sort of like I'm trying to be careful because I'm on a podcast, can't use the wrong kind of language, but it's like a two fingers stuck up at the and here you are, you're trying to stomp on us. No way, we're going to overthrow you. It's perfect war imagery. And again, like, if you ever want to own a copy of this, there are two better ones in the world that we know of. Good luck. Good luck waiting for another one. I don't care what grade it is. Like, you are not going to see another one of these for sale probably in the whole of 2023. So you better get this one if you want it.
Yeah. And I'm just, as always, I'm fascinated by all this. Hard to pivot, but we have literally 20 days and change till the Goldin 100, but then literally a week later you have the Spring Elite, which I mean, elite is an understatement. I only picked out about 4 books because we could go on and on for days. And I mean, I'm going to kick it off with the fifth one first. I don't think I've ever seen a Hulk 1 in an 8.0. Personally, I've never seen those. That's another one that, like, as far as Silver Age is I don't know why. We talked about this previously, like with like Fantastic Four 1 versus 5, because 5 seems really rare. Hulk 1 feels similar, and you would know way more about Zimmy, but Hulk 1 seems incredibly rare. It is more expensive than a lot of the counterparts of that era, because it just seems like, and I've never seen an 8.0 before. Personally, that's insane. Yeah, that's an incredible grade for this book.
As far as I know, the highest graded of this book is a 9.4. It was a 9.4, maybe a 9.6 has popped since then. I'd have to check. But what I wish I wish I'd thought to send you an image of the Hulk one, the first ever Hulk one that I owned as a comic book dealer. I bought it in a collection. The collection was about 1/3 of the comics had the previous owner had taken scissors to the inner pages and cut heroes. I presume you make a scrapbook or something. So you
Yeah.
open a page and there'd be a hole in the page.
Oh,
And it was random. Like one book might have it and the next book wouldn't. And so I'd have to check every single one because I didn't want to get any returns on eBay or whatever. And yeah, so it had a Hulk one. The entire book had been torn in half. And I love to think that it was someone's parent who got mad with their kid. They grabbed their Hulk one and tore it in half to teach them a lesson. And then the kid diligently scotch taped it back together. And there was scotch tape all over the cover, front and back, that actually had dried out. So it fell off when I was handling it.
oh my
So
God.
you get those nice scotch tape stains. It was literally every part of the cover had damage to it. Like honestly, it was all there. It was a 0.5. It was all there. And I have never seen a lower grade Silver Age key that was all there. I mean, and now obviously it's a little challenging when the cover's there but split and detached. This wasn't. This was still all attached. It was all in one piece. But it was really, really ugly. It was really ugly. I'd love to.
Was it ripped sideways, I'm guessing?
Like, yeah, it was like, imagine taking turning it sideways so your hands are like covering up the title and Dr. Banner's feet, and then tearing it like in the middle from the right edge into like. I should look for it and send you so you can put a picture on the screen. Anyway, we'll do that another time. The average grade of a Hulk one is about between 3 and 4.
Mm-hmm.
When they don't come up that often, I do think there is something like 1,700 or 1,800 in the census of the US.
It's not a lot.
It's not a lot for a Silver Age. No, it's one of the more scarce Silver Age keys. But yeah, we've got them over the years. We've had maybe a dozen in the entire time I worked with Sean at some of my comic books, and yeah, they're usually VG. And because it's purple, what is wrong with it always shows really, really obviously on the front. It's like the worst cover. It's probably a worse color than black. I think probably yellow in the Golden Age is the worst color because of the paper was kind of dense, and anything dirt sticks to that and will not come off. And the worst color for the Silver Age, I think, is that bright cherry red color, like the front of ASM 50.
Okay, yeah.
So that for me, I think, is worse actually than black. But purple for sure is worse than black. Purple just there's something about purple. It rubs off really easily. It just it looks awful when there's damage. But this one honestly, even for an 8.0, this was so nice looking. And yeah, it's the nicest one I've ever had any part of selling. I know there are higher graded examples. I was just going to look it up, wasn't I? Let's see.
And I think it was not a popular book, right? Because they canceled it after a few years, I remember, and they brought it back. And then it's always I always find it interesting, Captain America was one of those ones as well. Like when the war was over and superheroes had kind of like dissipated a bit, like he was canceled off, then brought back, and same thing with Hulk, like he was canceled off. And I remember reading that, again, that's why I think maybe that's why they're rare, because he just wasn't a very popular, character as much as like a Spider-Man or the other big ones. But yeah, it's man, that's a beautiful book. I have not seen, like I said, I've never seen it personally myself. I've never come across a better grade, and I know there's better ones, of course, but that's a gorgeous looking Hulk one. That's
my memory served me well. There's a 9.4. That's the single highest graded.
Wow.
I doubt if that'll ever be beaten because of the nature of the purple cover. It's just going to be impossible to beat that. 6.92s, 13.90s, 11.85s, which is amazing. And then there are 13.80s. So what's that? That's 26, 30, 37, 43, 44 examples in the world, this nice or better. And the total census of unrestored examples is 1,400.
That's not a lot.
That's not a lot.
That's not a lot at all.
As you say, you're probably right. It probably was one of the obscure keys. Like, it wasn't even part of a run. So when you had Journey into Mystery 83, you could, I suppose, have been a completist collector and has just been collecting Journey into Mystery. And then just by chance, they changed the nature of it to a hero book at number 83 and the first appearance of Thor. So if you were buying every copy every month, you would just by random chance have bought a Journey 83. But Hulk didn't exist. It was a brand new title.
Yeah.
And even in the modern era, launching a brand new title has a lot of risk. It's not a no-brainer. Hulk became part of the Avengers, and so by then he was well established. But he was just a new character, and the gray color of his skin did not go down well with readers, so they changed it to green in episode 2. And I think Hulk 2 is undervalued because that's the Hulk everyone knows. This is a Hulk that no one really knows. But to own this, I mean, this would be a dream book for me. I have a Hulk one. I think it's a 4, and to me, it's like that's the average grade I see. When I see them, and so I'm going to keep this one. One day it came in the office. Actually, I bought it from England. I got an email from some guy whose aunt used to work on the cruise ships, and every 3 months she'd come back to England and bring in American comics, and he just kept them.
Oh, that's so cool.
And I was going home anyway, so I said, I'll come over and buy it from you. So I showed up with a pile of cash and bought his Hulk one. And I just said to Sean, I'll give you your half of what would be the profit. I paid, I don't know, at the time it was, I'm going to guess, 6,000 or 7,000 paid for it, and Hulk ones in VG were going for about 10. So I gave Sean the difference and I kept it. And now, I mean, they have jumped.
They've spiked big time.
They did in the pandemic, but not to the extent that other keys did. It's still a book I think is undervalued. I just emailed you a copy of a picture of my first Hulk one.
Let me pull that up before we go on to the next one.
We can compare and contrast what.
This is awesome.
What a 0.5 looks like and what an 8.0 looks like.
Let's pull this in. The cool thing about Restream too is you can pull in on the fly, which I love. So let's do that. Oh, that is. It's actually it's a little better than I thought it was. The way you described it.
Stop being nice.
I mean, look, it's a little better. Like
see where the tape was over the question mark, where it was torn in half.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, to your point, it is together, right?
Yes.
I think I expected a lot worse. It's bad. Like, look, in comparing, contrasting to the 8.0, let's go to the 8.0 now. I mean, it's nuts. Like, that is clean
as a slight improvement.
Yeah, but it's still cool. And to your point, I also love when you talk about, I mean, these are pieces of history, right? I love the drawing in the Hulk, like in the name, like the red drawing. Yeah. I have a piece of original art from and obviously there's not the best track record behind this person, but original sketch from Bob Kane of Batman and Robin, and it's made out to Sam. Best wishes, Sam. And I actually like that. It's cool. I think it's part of history. So I like seeing stuff like this. I've seen a AF-15. I think it was signed from Stanley to like Dan or Daniel or something like that, where it's like, to Dan, best wishes, Stan. And I think that, again, that's part of the provenance and the history behind it.
For sure.
Now, would you want it ripped in half? No,
probably not.
But
no. Would you prefer to own this or the 8.0? I mean, honestly.
Oh yeah, it's not even a question. But I still think, I mean, that looks almost like a brand new on the rack book. When you go from the 0.5, it looks like you just pulled that. It looks like a reprint of that's how good it looks. Because that looks more like what you would expect to see, like a lower to mid grade. But
there's a slight improvement in eye appeal on the 8.0, yeah, for sure.
We can just do this all day long, go back and forth. It's great. All right, so that's the next book, which I thought was really cool. Another one that I haven't seen a lot of. Like, we talk about Golden Age versus Silver Age when like characters are reintroduced. We have the Human Torch in the Golden Age of Marvel Comics 1, and then coming back and rebranded. And this is cool. Golden Age Green Lantern. I I haven't seen this a lot either, and this is really fascinating too.
You won't. I was just about to put up the census numbers on that. It's top of my head, it's 17 or maybe 27, something like that. It's very low. It's one of the rarer Golden Age keys. Hang on, maybe I'm getting mixed up with Pep 22. Let's have a look. Oh no, 31. Oh, sorry, I lied. It's 31.
They're everywhere.
Yeah, I keep tripping over in my office. No, yeah, the highest grade is a 9.4. That was from the Mile High collection. And yeah, but this is not a 9.4. This is a 1.5, which you may think, oh, only a 1.5. Why would I want to own this? Well, the nice thing about this being a 1.5 is that the grade is it's been significantly lowered in grade because the spine is split. But
okay.
the front is very presentable for a 1.5. Like, you've seen 1.5s with pieces missing, with well, that Hulk one I had earlier was a 0.5. It wasn't that far off this grade, and they're like day and night. This is a lovely looking 1.5, and I wouldn't say it's affordable.
I just like throwing this in there.
You can just replace my face with that. That'd be great. I wouldn't say this is an affordable copy, but relatively speaking, you will not be able to afford one that comes up that's higher. I mean, they are six-figure books, though. I will say that. So, in any condition, I think this book is six figures, and this copy will probably sell for between $150,000 and $200,000, which, yeah, it's kind of crazy, but they're just so rare. I mean, 30. Yeah. What are you going to do? You're going to say, no, I'm not buying a copy that's got a split spine. I'm going to hold out for a better one. One of the other 30 in the world. Yeah. Good luck.
Yeah. Good luck.
That idea. Yeah, it's I like this one because the colors are very rich and deep. You know, it hasn't been sort of sat in a picture frame and fading over the years, as quite often happens. And it's just a lovely looking copy. Like, it really is nice. There's nothing missing on the front anyway, as far as I can tell. And it's just pretty. It's just a pretty 1.5. You don't often say that about low grade books, but it is.
Yeah. The next one up, another one that, again, I mean, you see more often, but still, it's talk about like a vibrant cover. So, like, this is one of my favorites of the Golden Age, the hypodermic needle cover that we always talk about with Batman. And man, it is just, it's really cool. The second cover with Batman, is that the second? It's the second cover, right? Or no?
We're way past there. This is Detective 35.
Okay. So was 31?
27, 29, 31, 33, 34, 35. 34, did it have him on the cover or not? I'm not 100% sure. This is either the fourth or the fifth Batman cover.
Wow. Still pretty.
Pre-Robin Batman, yeah, like Detective. It's pre-Robin the Detective. Just to me, like, Batman was badass in those days, and when Robin appeared, it kind of spoiled the party a little bit. Little bit like Scrappy Doo spoiling Scooby Doo. Like, if you were a Scooby Doo fan growing up, like, once Scrappy appeared, it was game over. But yeah, this is a very famous cover because of the hypodermic thing. There are collectors who just focus on those sort of controversial covers. And this is I think the most controversial early Batman cover. There are others too. I mean, like, number 29 is the second Batman cover, and he's sort of smashing through a window where there's a scientist with I think a hypodermic in his hand or something like that, or maybe it's a test tube. I can't remember. But yeah, this is the one where he's literally going to poison the guy with the hypodermic, and Batman intervenes. It's a very iconic early Batman appearance. The colors are really nice. It's an affordable copy. Like, I don't even know what they sell for at the moment, but I think it's around 35,000, something like that. So not beyond the realms of possibility that some people can afford it. Not like a $3 million book. So yeah, if you're a Batman fan and you've been priced out by Detective 27, Detective 29, Detective 31, which is that classic cover of his head as a mountain kind of thing.
Oh, that's a gorgeous copy too.
Detective 33, which is the origin story. And then there's this one, and it's like, this is a really cool cover. It's a lovely example. And yeah, I mean, I'm seriously tempted to bid on this book myself. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to, but it's actually one of those books you could aspire to own. Most people could aspire to own, whereas there are plenty of books that we've talked about today that most people couldn't realistically aspire to own.
Yeah, I mean, someone posted a video. It was a recent auction. It was a Tech 27, and they were like a comic influencer, and they were like, "Do I sell everything in my collection to try to bid on this book?" And he was like, "Screw it, I'm going to do it." Right? And he bid. I think it was like $1 million or something, and immediately was outbid. I think it spiked to 1.1 or 1.2, something like that. And he was like, "Well, I guess that dream's dead." Like, it was literally like I can't imagine the sweat of thinking, "Okay, we're doing this," and then doing it and then being like, "Well, that didn't work," and then being like, "All right, cool." Like, probably better off because you'd have to. I can't imagine selling. I don't know. I don't even know how that works. With $1 million of in an auction or whatever. Yeah.
So here's an interesting segue then. So what Goldin will do, if you're interested in bidding on a high dollar item, I mean, this is for most people a high dollar item. So let's just talk about this book. Let's say it's $30,000. You can pay for your invoice with consignment. So instead of selling everything you own to buy one book, or not even to be sure you're going to buy one book, selling everything you own to just justify the fact that you want to bid on something is a high risk strategy. I mean,
Yeah.
you've spent 10 or 15 years or even longer building a collection, and you're so enamored with one item that you're prepared to trade your entire collection for that item, then to me it makes sense to get pre-approved to bid that amount by Goldin. And what we typically do is we ask for evidence that you can afford to do that. And that could be other graded books. So let's say you had $30,000 of Silver Age keys or something, and you wanted to trade them for this. You would provide us with evidence that you own these books. Maybe we'll do a credit check. You fill out a form, put some ID, and then we'll pre-approve you to bid up to a certain level. And if you win, then you can not only pay with consignment the items that you've already kind of shown us, but we'll give you extra break on the commission on those items to sort of thank you for your repeat custom. So I think it's an extra 2%, which doesn't sound like much, but we're talking about 30,000. That's a lot of money, and or more. Like if you're going for the Hulk one, that could be $200,000. That's a significant saving, and it sort of takes away the jeopardy. I've sold everything I own. I want to win this book, and then the second later someone outbids you. That's a horrible feeling, and you've lost your collection. It just doesn't. So yeah, paying with consignment is definitely an option, and people should. I wouldn't wait till the last couple of days before the auction starts to start that conversation. It takes a little while. The more money is involved, but for example, the Action One, we know of a bidder who has been pre-approved to bid on that book, and if they win, they're going to pay over $1 million worth of it in consignment. So that's the way to do it. Get pre-approved and pay afterwards with consignment. Don't sell something you own in the hope of something that you might not
have that stack of collateral from all those like books that you have and be like, all right, this is what I'm doing. I'm basically trading in my entire collection over time after this to get this one Grail. So next one that again kind of reminds me of the Hulk one. I've obviously Spider-Man ones. You see them a bit, but I don't think I've ever seen one. I have a 3.0 that has, the funny thing is we've talked about this. Mine's not, I got this a while ago, but it's not the collector's 3.0. It is in very good shape, but there's a corner missing. So if it wasn't, it'd probably be like a 5 or a 6. An 8.0. I mean, wow. It's another one that's like, it's stunning, and I don't even know. It might even be better than an 8.0, but I don't want to speculate. That looks really flawless. And you've said in the past that a Spider-Man 1 is actually harder to find than an AF-15 as far as like ones that you see go across like the selling desk. Like you see more AF-15s I think pop up than Spider-Man 1s.
I think that Spider-Man 1 has become the poor man's AF-15, the way that Action 7 has become the poor man's Action 1. And you're still rich if you can buy an Action 7, but the price difference between grades of an AF-15 and ASM1 is of course significant, but it's closing. As more people realize, oh, I'm just never going to be able to afford an AF-15. So they go for the ASM1. And there's not that much to really get excited about of an ASM1 from a historic perspective, apart from the fact it's issue 1 of The Amazing Spider-Man, which is the world's most collected series. But there's no first appearance in there. It's got a Fantastic Four crossover. The story is actually good. I don't know if you've ever read it, but the story is actually kind of fun. And when I was teaching myself to press that collection that had the cutouts in, I would obviously have to go through every single book to make sure there weren't any pieces missing before I went to the bother of pressing and grading them. And so while I was waiting for the presses to warm up, I would just read the story. I thought, well, while I'm checking the book, I might as well read the stories. And yeah, you can read Marvel Masterworks, or you can even go online and read digital copies of everything. But there's nothing like owning an original and actually reading it.
Yeah. Oh.
So yeah, so it's a fun story. But as you say, that the average grade of an ASM1 is probably around 5. And there's a world of difference between a 5 and an 8. It's not 3-point difference or 6-point if you count the halves. It's more like a 30 or a 40. Like it's much bigger jump than people think. And so like a jump between a 9.0 and a 9.4 is far less obvious than the jump between a 5 and an 8. It just is. Because at that level, the imperfections are much smaller, and so you need to look hard to find them. But to get a whole an ASM1 and an 8.0, it's a pretty unusual thing. And what's really nice about this copy is the sharp corners. There's no chipping. Yeah. You wouldn't find a copy with Marvel chipping at an 8.0, but there's all this debate about whether or not Marvel chipping should be counted because it was a manufacturing defect. The same way that printers creases are manufacturing defects. Printers crease. When Miss Marvel 1 for some reason almost always has printers creases, where the paper was sort of squished as it was prepared for printing, and so it's not a crease as such, but it's like a ridge that runs through the books, and that's not counted as a defect. Obviously, if you put a 9.8 side by side with one that doesn't have printers creases, people will prefer to have the one that doesn't, but they're not supposed to count off for printers creases because it happened during manufacture. Well, the same is true of Marvel chipping. The blade wasn't sharp enough to cut the cover, and so it kind of created a dent because it was like forcing it through.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you've seen Marvel chipping on a lot of the Silver Age keys, and it shouldn't count off, really. But even if they didn't, even if there was an 8.0 that had lots of Marvel chipping, collectors would want the one that doesn't because they look so much nicer.
Presents better, yeah.
Yeah. But yes, this is probably one of the nicest ASM1s I've ever seen. Certainly an elite level book. Off the top of my head, they're about 30, 35 or 40,000. I'd have to look it up again. Prices have changed so much in the last year or two that went crazy high, and then now they're kind of coming back. Now they're consolidated. Prices since January have definitely gone slightly up and a lot sideways and slightly up. If you look at graphs, they kind of went like this and then like that, and now they're kind of like they're doing the little creep up thing that they usually do when we don't have pandemics. Let's see, 8.0. Oh,
I've seen the same thing with ASM 15 or not ASM, AF 15 too, because those were up, and then I think after No Way Home, and plus the pandemic, I wouldn't say coming to a close, but where people are starting to go back in and it's changing. They've started to creep back up a little bit too as you watch the sales, and they happen quite often. and it's it's still rare, but not as rare as like a Tech 27. But
Yeah.
it is interesting to see that those are starting to creep up again as well, which is, I feel like we're finally solidifying from the free fall we had last year. But it is really interesting, and I think the ASM one is, again, it's a piece of history. My favorite thing about ASM one, I've read the first, I think, 25. It's so hard to get through some of them. Number 2 is really difficult. The Vulture is just like the way he outmaneuvers Spider-Man. It is so, but again, like for the time, it was so game changing. But my favorite thing about Spider-Man 1 is clearly he doesn't join the Fantastic Four. They made a whole what if about it. And that final, I don't know, what do you call that? It's because the splash page is the opening. What is it's the rolling, what do you call the final page? Is there a name for that?
That
Like
probably is. I just don't know what it is off the top of my head.
he's such a baby. He's such a little whiny baby, and he is for the first few issues, and he wants to join the Fantastic Four for money. They are like, we don't get paid, we're here to help save the world. And like, he's like, what do you mean? And and then he ends up, like, obviously they take the chameleon down and all that stuff, and he ends up walking off, kind of similar to, I think, the first, there's quite a few times, that iconic ASM 50 cover. It's kind of like that in that final frame where he's like walking off and as Peter Parker, and he's like, oh, my life's awful. It's just such a little whiny baby. It's so funny. But then again, that's what made it different, because he was a teenager, even though he looks like he's 30. He looks like a skinny David Hasselhoff.
Exactly. He does.
But yeah, I think that's what made it so different in the area. It's so, nothing like it existed at that point. But those people, if there are big Spider-Man fans out there who haven't read the first 20 to 25, you should go read it. It is interesting. Obviously it's sign of the times, but also just the storytelling is different, and it's worth having that as in your background of knowing it, because it is fascinating, I think.
So I was totally off base on the value of this book. The last sale was in 2022. Which date? It was November. Okay, so November was not a good time to be selling comic books. We were in like the slump period, but it sold for 66,000, which was a record for that grade. The previous highest was 45,000 in 2020. So
Wow.
yeah, much more, double what I thought it was worth. So that shows me. So that was also in a depressed market. So I don't know, what could this sell for? It could sell for a 70 plus. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And they don't sell very often. So that was one sale in 2022. Yeah. So I have no.
It really is what people will pay for it. Like, I think if you're looking to get, and then you can't, it's like timing the market. You can't do it. If you're looking to get a steal on a book that's that, like an 8.0, which is that rare, it's tough, because it could sell for, like you said, it could sell for 40 or 45 or 50, and then it could sell for 70, 89. I mean, it really is at that level. It's someone who really wants it and what they're willing to pay for it, because that's when it's that rare,